little low, a little low, Derek. Oh, yeah, that was too high. Pardon me while I try to adjust this. Okay. Hey there. I am doing video for just general knowledge to the public for Gulf War illness. So I don't know how many know, but I am a Desert Storm veteran. I'm also a lifetime member of the DAV and the VFW. And so recently, this week, I got some information that I didn't hear it in the media. I didn't hear it via the VA, which this is kind of information that should be all over the news. And it's the kind of information that we should be receiving letters for, but of course we won't. And that's why I'm going to discuss what it's about and why we're not getting letters. So for the veterans who watch this, I know I'm speaking to the choir. So I'm just going to read this article. It's about the riddle of Gulf War illness. I'm a veteran with Gulf War illness. I've said that in older videos, if you've ever watched any of my older videos, or people that know me, that I've struggled with this Gulf War illness for 30 years, 30 plus years now. And I have the spine disease because of it. All of my health problems, except for maybe one, is all Desert Storm related. There's been this myriad of ideologies of what has caused Desert Storm illness, and that is after several years to pretty much ongoing of the constant, like, trying to act like it doesn't exist. But to this day, even though they acknowledge that Desert Storm illness does exist, they still, 85% of people who file for compensation for Gulf War illness are denied. And that's just something that they do. I personally received a letter from the Department of Defense in the late 90s. I got ill while I was at war, so I came back sick. And I had, certain myriad of issues, if you will. I won't even go into all those. I think I've talked about them before. But, they said that I was downwind. There was a certain amount of people that were calculated to being downwind sarin leaks. So we had alarms going off, and I personally believed that we were truly being exposed to chemicals. In fact, I had a prophetic dream about it before the alarm started happening. And I went to the chaplain and talked about it, about these dreams that I was having. And I was also a journalist, so I annotated a lot of things while I was over there. It was actually the first declared war where women were actually in combat. Now, women have always served, at some capacity in wars, like since the beginning of time. But the first declared war in our country where women, were in combat. So it was kind of a big thing. And so I did some journalism, did a lot of interviews and so forth. And literally I went around and interviewed people, from different, not just my branch, but other branches, other countries, soldiers that were there, just on their ideas, women in combat, stuff like that. So I had a lot of annotations, a lot of journals, which, after the war, I couldn't even really publish it due to a lot of things being classified, and I didn't know that it was going to be like that when I first started out doing it. But in the end result, my journals were used for, sent off to the Pentagon. I had an interview with the Pentagon when they did, it was like late 90s, like 99, and they were doing some kind of research, and I had a lot of information in my journals because I was reporting where people were reporting symptoms, where we were at the times, and all that. So that was just data to them that they used. But I received a letter in 98, and just so you know, before I was deployed to Desert Storm, I went to the short form of NBC school, which is Nuclear Biological Chemical Warfare School, and they have a shorter course, so I took that. And so, when all these alarms start going off, I knew. In the desert environment, when they have all these sandstorms and stuff, the formulations that they use to try to calculate how much stuff is going to affect in travel, it's really not even realistic. It's not even realistic. However, I received a letter that I had been downwind sarin, but no worries, they said. No worries. It's anywho's. So the thing about sarin, that particular chemical, is that there are no doctors that have training to know how to look for symptoms. It's not something they go to medical school for. It's a very obscure type of knowledge. And so when in 2014 and 15, when I went and participated in a Gulf War illness study that was funded by the Department of Defense in the East Coast, and I actually kind of spearheaded the campaign of recruitment for veterans for that study, because when they first started it, they didn't have the amount of people in that area to participate, and so they started looking across the country, and they didn't have the housing set up for it, so people had to fly. They didn't have the funding for flying them out there, getting them to come out there, so I had to work with charities to get, free flights and stuff like that arranged for them, and eventually got housing for them, people to come and have a place to stay and not be out of pocket to participate in the study. You think the Department of Defense would have helped, but they didn't. Once they approved a certain amount of funds, that was it. So at any rate, so I participated in this, this study. And one of the doctors, the leading doctors of that study, just happened to be a previously a Department of Defense nuclear radiation specialist. So he had very specialized knowledge and training, but even with the knowledge that he has, it's not like something he can diagnose somebody, because any kind of medical diagnosis, regardless of what kind of training you've had, has to go through the peer review studies before it can even be accepted. So that's kind of a complicated thing with Gulf War illness. But he did tell me, looking at my CAT scans, which the VA, none of the VA doctors could identify because they don't have the knowledge of the training. But he clearly said that he believed that it looked like mustard gas exposure, sarin. And so, I've had all kinds of issues and problems, and, I was identified very early on with Gulf War illness, just because I was sick, active duty, and I actually was medically boarded out. And so I guess I wouldn't say I was one of the lucky few that I had it annotated in my record that this is service connected and it's Gulf War illness. You know what I mean? But other people who have, maybe they got out soon after they came back and they weren't able to get it established, and the government has a certain way of making records disappear. There's an all-out search for records, and I can tell stories, so many stories. I could write books on things that I have seen. Well, I'll just give you one example. When I was active duty, they, no, I take that back. Let's see. They had tried to get rid of my record, and I caught them. I was married at the time, and my husband had come to meet me in the ER, and they thought I had like leukemia or lymphoma, something like that, because I had all kind of blood issues. And so I had gone to this hematologist, and so this staff member came out, this was the VA, and told this person, this was back in the 90s, before everything was digital, and we actually had physical records that we carried around from clinic to clinic with us. Okay, my older veterans, okay, you remember that? Anyways, and so I saw this person come out and tell this staff member to throw that in the trash, and it was a record. It had to do with my blood. And I'm coming out of the bathroom, and and I hear it, and I walk up to that person's doctor, goes back in behind the closed doors, and I go up to him. I said, "Don't you do it? Don't you even do it? Don't you dare!" I said, "You give me that right now." I was like, I'm in his eyeballs, right? And he was just like, and gave me that document. But for I had not heard that record would have been destroyed on the spot. So there's systematically ways that records disappear. At any rate, the struggle goes on. So I'm going to read the riddle of Gulf War illness. And, the purpose of doing this video is I'm asking for prayer. I'm asking for people to share this video and just kind of help spread awareness. So this is October 2022. This is my most recent edition. I get these every month. Like I said, I'm a lifetime member of DAV. And so I'm just going to show you the date. I don't know if you can see that. Okay, so this is the edition that this is coming from. And so it's page 9. So if you have this edition, veterans, if you haven't read it, you might want to read it, especially if you're But if you have relatives that are Gulf Desert Storm veterans, please share this info. If you know somebody that has somebody, okay? So just showing you this article, so I'm fixing to read and I comment on it. The riddle of Gulf War illness. Researchers identify a chemical weapon as root cause of once inexplicable symptoms. It's never been inexplicable to me, but whatever. Anyways, on we go. The origins of Gulf War illness have eluded veterans. Eluded me, but okay. And medical researchers for decades. But now, a new study seems to have cracked the case on how roughly 250,000 veterans were sickened during the 1991 Persian Gulf War exposure to the chemical weapon sarin. While combat lasted 43 days, the harmful health effects on some who served in the conflict have stretched for decades. Witness to that. Known as a cluster of one inexplicable symptoms. Inexplicable. Perfect. Gulf War illness, sometimes called Gulf War syndrome, can include muscle aches, joint pain, dizziness, memory lapses, headaches, fatigue, and insomnia. There's a whole different ranges of cluster. Those are just a few of symptoms. For more than 30 years, federal efforts have come up short in deciphering the root causes of these puzzling symptoms. To help solve the mystery, a team of researchers at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School looked at the genes and surveys of those affected. Quite simply, our findings prove that Gulf War illness was caused by sarin, which was released when we bombed Iraqi chemical weapon storage and production facilities, said Dr. Haley, the study's lead author and director of epidemiology in the internal medicine department at UT Southwestern. Now I'm going to stop right here just so you know. I contacted this Dr. Haley, oh gosh, I think 2011. He had a study that included a special test. At that time it was special. It's a little more common now, but it's called fMRI. It's a special type of MRI. And what it showed was decreased blood flow to the brain in the Gulf War veterans. And so I wanted to go down there and participate in the study. And what happened was, as soon as he came up upon that information, the DOD pulled the plug, meaning he was prevented from doing further studies. So I'm just saying that because they comment like, you know, these things are eluding them. And well, yes and no, but here's the thing. They have no. They have no. And I say this because of there's specific tests that they don't discuss in the media. They don't discuss pretty much anywhere, but I'm going to refer you to a documentary if you've not ever watched it, and it's called Gulf War Illness Conspiracy Test. It was a documentary done by, I believe, the Discovery Channel, and actually there's videos here on YouTube, and I will go research those links that I have. I've shared it before. And what happened was there's a specific type of blood test called Sky test, and it's like it's where they color code your chromosomes. And what they're looking for is breakage in your chromosomes that then transplant onto other chromosomes and causes all kinds of health havoc. And they've done these tests usually these type of tests are done on cancer patients who have been through radiation treatment to see what kind of damage is done to their body, to kind of get an ideology, what things to look for in their health being affected. Because radiation obviously does damage to your blood cells, to your DNA, and so forth. And so what they found, they did this test. There was this really rude journalist, and he was just trying to say it was all a hoax, and it just didn't exist. He had so many sick veterans, okay? And so there was 5 veterans, okay, I know 2 of them, and 5 veterans who put their blood on the line, so to speak. And so they were very sick, had all kinds of problems, and one of them actually had stage 4 bone cancer and survived, and did a blood test, and what it did is it showed all kinds of damage to the chromosomes, and they had as much or more damage to their chromosomes than the cancer patients who had been through radiation treatment. And so this Dr. Durakovich, who was this researcher, and he had gone over to the Middle East, and he had used equipment showing that there was still depleted uranium. Okay, depleted uranium is a controversial issue because it's like there was big no-nos with the UN, and it was used anyways. But there were chemicals that was released not on our end, so I don't know why they're like, it wasn't just us. There was things being done over there. But at any rate, I know because I was there. Uh, I remember when the chemical alarms went off, and I was like, they kept telling us not to worry, that it was false alarm, false alarm, false alarm. And part of the problem was we weren't equipped with enough mop gear. And at one point, I got in trouble because I was like, man, forget this. I was fed up, and I put my mop gear on. And once you would open that up, it's like it only lasts for so long. So I kind of got fussed out over that. But they just didn't have, as many times as those chemical alarms went off repeatedly, we were not equipped to even be protected. At any rate, so these alarms were going off, okay, and they just kind of mops nixed it, if you will. But so anyways, this researcher, but this other researcher, Dr. Berkovich, he was involved in that documentary he was going after this depleted uranium. And they're just like, shh, they won't even allow you to discuss it. But sarin was the other issue. And that's why there's like split of symptoms. There's all different kinds of symptoms, all different kinds. And so they're only mentioning certain ones in this article. So I want people to know that, just so you know, it's not common knowledge, but there's actually 4 definitions of gopher illness. And Kansas definition doesn't mean it happened in Kansas. It has anything to do with Kansas. It's just research. They specified going and targeting and discussing and researching a specific set of symptoms. And that was the Kansas definition of gopher illness. So it's just that cluster of symptoms. So they've actually broken down within the government, but you don't hear about that. Like in VA, you just hear the words gopher illness. So not very many people know about that. But I was identified with Kansas gopher illness, definition of gopher illness. And it doesn't mean I don't have the other symptoms as well. But for the purposes of the gopher illness study that I participated in, you had to have been, they go through like a review, all the veterans who were recruited to, they were basically interviewed, they go over your symptoms, medical records and evidence that you have these types of symptoms. So they had to identify that you had this particular cluster of symptoms of the gopher illness before you can participate in their study. Anyways, so onward I shall read. There are still more than 100,000 gopher veterans, sorry, that's my back, who are not getting help for this illness. And our hope is that these findings will accelerate the search for better treatment. The researchers include 1,016 veterans of the Persian Gulf War, about half of whom have gopher illness. They also tested for a pair of gene variants, one of which efficiently breaks down sarin, and one that processes some pesticides but not sarin. Different combinations of these gene types can have varying impacts on developing gopher illness. The study found that those with the least protective genotype and who heard chemical alarms during the war, which I did, I annotated it in my journals, were nearly 9 times more likely to develop symptoms. Plus, they have record of everything that happened over there, and I'll discuss that in a minute. Sarin was not only stored in Saddam Hussein's Iraq, but also used on the country's citizens. I'll go into that in a minute. In 1988, as the Iran-Iraq war was drawing to a close, Iraqi Kurds in Halabja, an Iraqi town about 9 miles from Iran, were targeted with a mixture of chemical weapons, one of which was sarin. Armed with the knowledge of past use, American and coalition forces, many countries participated, not just America, okay, to eliminate the likelihood of sarin being deployed against them. However, little did they know it would result in American troops being unknowingly exposed to toxic substances once again. As is common with toxic exposures, we may not have immediate answers as to why groups of veterans develop certain symptoms or illnesses, and National Commander Joe Parstik, but there is still a need to care for those who were made ill in service and to continue pressing for research that will help us better understand those connections. End of article. So just so you know, I don't know how much history you remember, but there were many countries who contributed to bringing this person in power. We never can tell who we support and who we ally with, who would then turn to do evil things with their power. Once they obtain a certain amount of power, it happens. But there were certain multiple leaders of those Middle Eastern countries that were like, this is a problem and we need assistance. So we were contracted along with other countries to go in there and help. And it wasn't just about the oil. There was a lot of things that was never released in the media going on over there. Okay. I personally spoke to United Nations weapons inspector while I was in East Coast participating in that study at a VFW. And, you know, a former UN weapons inspector, chemical weapons inspector, the things that he told me, it's just like, probably society will never hear. It's like the things that are classified, you know, you may never know, you know. So at any rate, so here's the thing about this right here. My issue is this, is they've just recently passed a bill and passed this, I mean, like recently, like within the last couple weeks. All the war veterans who are still alive, every single war, are protected and have certain things advocated for them, but the Gulf War illness veterans. For example, the caregiver program. We're excluded. There were more injuries caused, more sick veterans, more injuries that came out of this war than any other in the United States history. And it's just, I guess the care is just massive for them to be compensating people. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of veterans that have, like, my spine, I have a spine of an 80-year-old. You don't know this to look at me, you know, and as we get older and middle age, that, you know, they just kind of try to pass these diseases off as they're just something that happens to people in society. But it's, you know, I had the spine of a 60-year-old when I was in my 20s, you know, and that's what was said. But at any rate, they don't, for example, I had my disc in my upper back, 2 of them was displacing my cord, my spinal cord. So I had to have this surgery and put rods in my back and everything. So I had, you know, long recovery. And I had, at that time, I had a medical assistant to come in my home, and she could cook for me and help me with, you know, cleaning, in addition to other things that she helped me personally with. And that was only for when I had surgery. But I personally need assistance now. But all the Gulf War veterans, they don't get that care. But if you're a Vietnam veteran, or if you're, you know, anything post 9/11, anything after Gulf War, all those veterans and all those wars, they get caregivers if they need them. But the Gulf War veterans are excluded. And this has been an ongoing tragedy happening to hundreds of thousands of veterans, that it's just like, we need awareness, we need, you know. And there's a person like who had recently talked to me about, yeah, we would just pass, hell, I was a part of this, you know, advocating for this new bill that, you know, Biden just signed. And I'm just like, well, what about the Gulf War vets? Well, yeah, we're working on that too, you know. And every single time, it doesn't matter what party or what president is in the White House, does not matter. Really, it doesn't matter. They're going to just sign whatever the legislators pass, and they always exclude the Gulf War veterans. And, you know, I'll give you an example what they did. So in 2018, I had the surgery on my upper back, and I had this caregiver for a short period of time. So then I had my lower back surgery in November. Okay, so I'm coming up on a year now. End of November, I had my back surgery. The only care that I could get, I basically had to have like help. I had to need help with shower or something personal. Like, you're not even allowed any kind of surgical recovery if you're in too much pain to be doing your chores, to be standing and doing your cooking, or to be doing your laundry. If you're in too much pain to even do that, you get no assistance whatsoever. Okay, and this is all Gulf War illness related. I haven't had a home cooked meal in years because I'm not able to, you know, like, I like to cook. You know what I mean? I love to cook, but I can't. I mean, like, for example, the last time I hosted a dinner, and I had, you know, my godkids and her family. And so it was, I think it was 2009. And so I cooked, I mean, a Thanksgiving dinner, and it was an all day, and I was in so much pain. And, you know, I made it through the dinner, and, you know, It was great. I was enjoying it, but I was in so much pain. By the time they left, I was vomiting because I was in that much pain. So I have to cook things that are quick, but I'm just saying, for example, so when I had this last surgery, they weren't allowed to do any of that. So they not only haven't included us in the new bills and getting us into caregiver and exclude the Gulf War veterans, all the other war veterans, if they need a caregiver, they gonna get it, right? But except for the Gulf War veterans. So not only did they exclude us again, they took from us what we had. So I was able to have a caregiver for at least cook and do some light chores while I'm recovering from this surgery. But now they're not even allowed to do that. They're not allowed to do that. They're not, no, you know what I mean? And so I had to eat just crap, junk food, stuff you stick in the microwave because I had nobody that could help me prepare my food while I was recovering from surgery. And I'm just, this article here is, they just kind of put a little something like this out. This should be in the media, right? This should be, people should be like marching and campaigning and, advocating and saying, hey, contacting the legislators and say, hey, do this. They know. Okay, they know. They have the evidence. They have the Sky blood test that proved that they had radiation chromosomal damage. None of those veterans whose blood was tested, they were never through any radiation treatment. And it was obvious that they had serious chromosomal damage, more than cancer patients who've been through radiation treatment. That's significant. They wouldn't acknowledge it. Dr. Haley, back in 2011, they mentioned him here on this most recent study he did. He saw in a newer test back then, it was new, fMRI, showed, reduced blood flow to the Gulf War veterans, and they pulled the plug. So they know that there are tests. There are tests that they can do that can prove damage, and we should be compensated. All the veterans, Gulf War should be compensated for this. They should be compensated with the evidence of these tests. It's like, for example, if you have suspicion of having diabetes, there are specific tests that you do to test for diabetes. So if you have suspicion of chemical damage to your body, there are specific tests that are available. This should be the standard of care to identify, but they refuse to acknowledge those tests can identify injury, and they do it deliberately so that they don't have to compensate them. And so I'm just asking people, please share this video. I don't want to go too long. I don't want to have a long video, and I appreciate everybody that's commented. Please share this video. Even if you make mention of it, I'm going to keep it on top of my list of, I don't know, I'm going to put it in my uncommonly known facts. I have an episode, I have a series that I do, Did You Know? It's a Did You Know series, and I have uncommonly known facts. And usually it's kind of stuff that's kind of a little bit more interesting, like new animals discovered and stuff like that. So I'm going to put this in that episode, in that playlist, because it's featured on my channel, and I'll make this stay on the top of that playlist. And I ask you to please refer people to this video to watch it. And I want people to comment on this video. They're interested in joining somehow or another to go to legislators. I've talked to these congressmen here in Oklahoma till I'm blue in my face, and they just are apathetic and lackadaisical, to be nice. They know that there's specific legislation that needs to be done when it comes to certain things with veterans, and they know. So, but this is where the power of the people comes in. So I'm asking people that please share this video. If you know somebody, maybe they're not even aware of this. If for anything, that they need to be aware for their own health. There were a lot of my friends who had babies right as soon as they came back from the Gulf War, and they had all kinds of health problems, I had fertility problems, so I never, I didn't have children. But, people need to know, they need to know that there are specific tests that I've discussed in this video that even if they can't get the VA to pay for it, you can get with private doctors and get these tests done. If anything, to know what is going on in your body that you're not going to find out at the VA. They're not going to tell you about it. There's the Sky blood test done, and there's the fMRI test done. These tests can be done. You can get with a doctor that will work with you to get these tests done. They're not commonly tests that are done, but so at any rate, and The more people that get these tests done, and the more people can join together and say, hey, we've had these tests done. This shows specific evidence of injury, and we want this to be an established standard for the veterans that these tests should be done, specifically that DNA test. And I talked to a genealogist from the VA from, I think she was from Utah several years ago. And I'm like, look, and I advocated this whole, everything I've said in here about this sky blood test and the documentary, all this other stuff. And she's like, oh yeah, well, I've never heard of that. I'll look into that and everything, and never heard back from her. Right. But I had a specific conference call with her and a staff member at the VA over this. And so I just suspect that she was told that that's not happening. You know what I mean? But we have to be our own advocates sometimes. And you, with your loved ones that are veterans, or your friends, or whoever, please, or maybe they're offspring of the Gulf War veterans, and they may have problems, because there are people that were born of these Desert Storm veterans that had health problems too. So, you know, DNA damage. So please, please, please share this video. And I thank you so much for stopping in. And as soon as I get done with this video, I'm gonna do another one, but it's gonna be a little bit more lighthearted, fun stuff. So if you want to still hang with me, come back in a few, and I'm gonna do another video. I love y'all. Thank you all so much for stopping in. God bless you all you veterans, you people support veterans. I thank you so much.